Hello and welcome to the Healing Modality Chronicles, and here we are in the woods to talk about forest bathing with lovely ladies.
Hi, I'm Joanna and welcome to the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary in Shear, beautiful grounds.
And I'm Katie, and together we are Harmony in Nature. So our aim is to take people out for a mindful meander in nature and send them back out into the world in a better, more relaxed, chilled out state.
Fabulous.
And we have our special homemade forest bathing microphone with us today.
We do. Creativity.
Yes, and it was a communal project, wasn't it? All of us were
Yes.
involved. Okay, so what is forest bathing? You might be wondering. And a lot of people think it's about swimming, even though they know sunbathing isn't about swimming. But it's from the Japanese Shinrin-yoku, which translates as immersion in woodland, really. Or in fact, it's immersing the human spirit under the canopy of trees, but shorthand, immerse in the woods. So yes, there's no swimming unless it rains, there's no water at all. It's considered a bit of a new age modality, which is rather hysterical since it's as old as time, really.
Yes.
And it's really sort of got a fairly recent history since the 1980s, where it started in Japan. And they had an issue with health, mental health and physical health in their cities, perhaps due to the impact of World War II, who knows, and the rapid industrialisation that followed that for them. And the government wanted to intervene. And of course they have there something called Shinto. It's like a belief system, not really a religion as such, but it's a real reverence for things, and especially reverence for nature. And hence nature was somewhere that they looked as a resource for inexpensive answers and something that would work with their physiology, because Japan is about 70% forest.
And so although it's something that, as Jo alluded to, it's been going out into nature and immersing ourselves in nature is something that's as old as time. In the 1980s, it was a real government and university co-project. So the government asked many of the medical departments of the universities in Japan if they would be interested in doing some research into the benefits of going out into nature. And the reason for this was to encourage people to go outside, to see if this would benefit this sort of chronic stress and illness that was going on, particularly in large urban centres. So many of the universities came on board, so it wasn't a single thing, it was a real collaboration. And different universities started looking into different things. Some investigated the atmosphere of the forest, what made up the air in the forest, and others were looking at the effects by monitoring how people responded in the forest, having spent various hours, or in some cases days, out in nature. And it's interesting to note that in Japan they have 70% forest cover. So the vast majority of the country is covered, whereas in England we only have 7%. Scotland and Wales are much better off, but overall for the UK we would say it's around 13% overall. So apparently we are the most deforested country in Europe, which is a bit of a shame.
Well, England is, isn't it? As opposed to UK.
Yes,
Probably.
yes, you're probably right
Yes.
there.
And only
Yeah.
2% of England is actually ancient forest, over 400 years old. And maybe older, but records weren't really kept before the Tudors, apparently. So we're very depleted. And hence, it was a much more natural fit, if you like, with the Japanese culture to look for woodlands. And the research that Katie's mentioned, the collaboration with all of the universities, means that it's now a very, very evidence-based therapy, which is fantastic.
Yes.
They took blood samples and spit samples before and after sessions in the woods, and they were able to determine from that forest bathing really improves your blood pressure and blood sugars. In most cases it brings them down because more people have high than low blood pressure and blood sugar. But in fact, if you have low blood pressure or blood sugar, it actually brings it up, which is quite astounding. And it has a positive impact on respiration, breathing generally, digestion, sleep cycle. It's supposed to help with weight loss. It improves, it helps, if you like. I shouldn't say improves anxiety, because it sounds like it makes it worse. It helps anxiety. It reduces rumination, which is where thoughts are going round and round in your head. And so it slows the thinking down, if you like. And really excitingly, it increases the NK cells, stands for natural killer cells in the immune system. And you might be thinking, why would you want to improve your natural killer cells? It doesn't sound very nice, but in fact they are the scavengers that help the immune system fight any invasion from bacteria, fungal, viral infections, etc. So it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
So lots of fantastic benefits, almost too good to be true.
Yes, and decreasing the cortisols, obviously the stress hormones.
Absolutely.
Yes, it has a massively positive effect on our stress levels and reducing cortisol, adrenaline, and all those things that are often coursing around our system in our day-to-day lives.
Resetting the nervous system as well.
Absolutely. It does reset the nervous system, and as well as the natural killer cells, very importantly, and particularly Professor Ching Li's research at the Nippon University in Tokyo discovered that it also increased anti-cancer proteins. So while the effects that any individual will have are very much dependent on where you are yourself at the start.
Yes.
So it's not a given that everybody will have everything in the same measures, not at all.
Yes.
It's all about nature responds to the situation that is in each of us. So, and it seems overall from some of the research to have an adaptogenic effect. So as with the blood pressure and blood sugar, it will bring you back to balance, which is
whether
fantastic.
you're in over or under activity,
indeed.
that's adaptogenic. Fantastic.
Yeah. So very exciting.
Yes, I mean, if somebody was suffering from ME, it would give them energy. Or if they were suffering from, really overdoing things and they need
ADHD,
relaxation, exactly, then it will have that effect instead. So how exciting is that? And as I said, it almost has that kind of too good to be true type impact, but in reality, because the adaptogenic response is directly connected to moving us out of our fight and flight state into our rest and recuperate state, that's really what the reason is that it can do so many things, because by resetting us, the immune system is boosted and the body helps to heal itself, or works to heal itself, I should say. I was just going to say that there's been more research in the UK since then, but obviously it all started in Japan, as we've said, and it's been going there for a lot longer. In Japan, they have a different attitude towards forest bathing. You can have formal sessions like we do, and sometimes that may be led by a health specialist and a forest specialist, but you may even go somewhere where it's self-led. You've got a little chart or map of where they suggest you go, and you walk around and you do that yourself, so that has a different impact on the body. Or it might even be that they recommend you go and read for 2 hours in the woods, which would also be beneficial. We'll come back to that in a moment.
Yes.
And over there, some doctors would prescribe it in addition or instead of medication, which is very, very exciting and something that we've been striving to do. But we knew that to get taken seriously by the NHS over here, it would have to be local data and evidence rather than from Japan. Would you like to bring us up to date with the UK?
Yes, so we trained with the Forest Bathing Institute, and they are really hot, as far as we know, on really collaborating with universities to get the evidence for how nature and the woods are affecting us. So their first study was one done in 2019 in some woods in Derbyshire. And very often the way that we measure it is using heart rate variability monitors, which has not really been used in Japan. And they will attach those to people, and they monitor the effect, what's going on in the beats. It's the monitoring the variation between the heartbeats. So it's not actually the heartbeats. And the higher the reading, i.e. the greater the variation, as I understand it, it shows that we have more adaptability, and the more adaptable we are, the better we cope with things in life. So that's a measure that they use quite frequently. And one of the discoveries was that, they timed the research as well. They timed the session, so they could tell which activities people were doing had the greatest impact on their heart rate variability, which, as I said, is an indication of where we are. So it's putting us into our rest and recuperate, and helping our, the polyvagal nerve, which runs the length of our bodies. So the ones that had the strongest effect were listening to running water, which was lovely. There was a stream running through the site, so that worked really well. Also was the sharing. We do have, while we tend to do our activities in silence while we're doing them, we have opportunities for getting together and sharing in a circle, which is always optional. But actually this connection that can be made was shown to be really beneficial, and it really increased the heart rate variability. And the two other areas that were high there were connecting with a tree. So sometimes we do that through touch, and then spending a bit of time with the tree. And what we call at the end, we have a more meditative activity, which we like to call tree relaxation. So as you imagine, in case it's beyond, it's not obvious, it's relaxing under a canopy of trees. And this is usually one of the favourite parts of sessions. And when we did the mixed group of 6-week sessions, they were always just saying, "Oh, we just want to get to the tree relaxation." So that's our bit. The aim is to slowly walk people through woodland activities, through their senses, and to gradually, so that the brain is, of course, it will be functioning in its normal thought processes, but gradually it just slows and slows until hopefully it just drops out of action, and you're left with your experience of what's coming to you through your senses. And by the time you get to tree relaxation, hopefully really zened out and at one and at peace with nature and with ourselves is the aim.
That's good, because that's the main question that a lot of people will wonder. What's the difference between a walk in a forest and forest bathing? You've already touched on this, but more specifically, if you could explain a little bit.
Thank you. Good question, Nadej, and one that we're often asked. So the main difference is that if you're walking by yourself in the woods, a number of things. Firstly, one tends to, this is very generalised, but most people's walk in the woods is very focused on A to B, where they're starting, where they're going, and not so much on the journey itself, and connecting in a sensory manner with the environment en route. Also, the speed of the journey is slowed down in a forest bathing session, and that's mainly because there is a direct correlation between the speed with which you move and the speed of your thoughts. And so if we want to move ourselves out of circular thoughts, which can be an issue for people particularly with anxiety, then it's important to slow us down. And that can be quite triggering for people to start with, because it's not what we're used to, but actually it's a really good practice to get into. And the main difference is that you are delegating the direction you're going in and the focus of the journey, what order you're doing the little optional activities, etc. So your mind can be completely on the personal experience and not on the management of the walk, if you like. And even down to some people, a lady on their own in the woods might feel a little bit vulnerable as well. So, company of other like-minded individuals is a gift. And because some of the exercises we do, we like to give permission for people to really have fun and enjoy the experience, like listening to the birds or, smelling the soil. You might snigger listening, but that's actually a really popular exercise and one that really brings back a lot of memories for people. And, some people would feel a little bit self-conscious doing that on their own in the woods. Whereas at least if there's a group of us doing it, we all get the funny looks together. And we certainly don't judge as guides. People think, do they have to be a tree hugger to come? Certainly not, but if they want to tree hug during the session, we're happy about that. We're not judgmental about it, but it's not a requirement. It's all about finding your own comfort zone, really, with making that personal connection with nature. Do you think that answers the question, Nadej, or does that leave any unanswered questions?
So it's all based about exploring the senses, from what I understand.
Yes, very much so. The 5 senses: taste, touch, smell, hearing and sight. And, we have so many tools of how to do that. The other thing about the difference between a session and doing it yourself is that because Katie and I have run between us over 100 sessions, probably close to a few hundred actually, over the years, because we really are out in the woods nearly all the time, and we have such an enormous toolbox of exercises that we are able to pull out of a hat one that works for that particular wind speed, or rain or no rain, sunshine, which is fantastic, and it keeps us on our toes. But it does mean that we can tailor the session pretty much to the interest of the audience and the weather of the day.
And the need, you were telling me, you can cater for specific needs, people with mental health or...
Yes, that's a good question. We've run 2 actually. I'll let Katie explain one of them in a moment. I'll explain the other. So very recently we did a session organised by the TFBI, and we were the delegated guides for it. And it was for 3 different charities, all based around Guildford. And they specialised in asylum seekers, homeless young people, people recovering from addictions and mental health issues generally, because Mind closed last year in Woking, not throughout the country, but that particular branch lost its funding sadly. And so that branch combined with one of the others, Catalyst, that we were working with, and so we had those people as well. The other organisations were Big Leaf, was the one working with the asylum seekers, and Amber was the provider of lodgings, if you like, for homeless young people. So we had up to 20 people between the 2 of us, which was a lot, and we didn't even know whether their first language would be English in all cases, or how whether they'd been, rather encouraged to come more than they wanted to. We didn't know really what sort of engagement level there would be. But it was fantastic because we decided that we would focus on making it enjoyable and using experiences, optional experiences still, but ones that would focus on helping them to feel more safe in their environment, and therefore, hopefully, lots of tools for them to take away. And we were very lucky to have somebody from UCL called Kat, who studied it, did research before and after about their moods, and she's busy crunching the numbers now, but it'll probably be 2 or 3 years before we have an official study from it and it's published anywhere. But very, very exciting for us, and we could just tell from the individuals who were participating, before and after each session, the verbal comments they made, and just watching them really, and the comments they made about, 1 or 2 of them said they'd really released a lot of stuff, during the session, which was amazing. And we had comments about how they felt their peripheral vision had improved as well. So that was the more recent one earlier this year in 2023. But Katie, in fact, you can talk about the challenges of that versus the one that we did before, because we did one last year just for Mind in Woking, 6 weeks with a smaller group, didn't we? So would you like to talk a bit about that?
Yes. Well, certainly with this last group, it was very exciting because we didn't quite know what we were going to be what was going to be happening, because with the funded sessions we don't get any health forms or any information on them. That's held by the charities, whereas for our personal sessions we always have an indication, so we know if we need to adapt, take account of situations for people. It's not that we don't run them or that there are any usually reasons we would not have them on a session, but we like to know what we're dealing with. So that was a bit of a, potentially having 20 people you don't know what
mobility issues, etc.
Yes, so we met this very mixed group. What was wonderful was that after the first week you didn't really get a sense that there was any division between them. They weren't sitting around in their groups particularly, and there was a real appreciation, I think, of what they all brought to the sessions. So obviously one groups they were older and other groups younger, others it was it was really heartwarming, actually, and I think we both felt very privileged to be part of this.
Yeah.
One of the challenges was that we never knew from one week to the next how many people we would have, or whether they would be the same or different. And throughout the 6 sessions, 2 people attended all of them, all 6. There were others who were there for most of them, but we would find there were new people every week. So the plan to have a general session the first week and then work with focusing a bit more deeply into, say, 2 of the senses, like hearing and sight, for example. It didn't quite come off the way we planned, because we kept having new people appearing, and then one of us would stay behind as we were walking to the starting point, stay behind trying to fill them in on a little mini forest bathing introduction as to what it was. But this kept happening each time. And even on the last session, on the 6th session, we had about 5 new people.
I think 7.
Was it?
Yeah, so almost a third were brand new. And
We're
it was
brand
supposed
new.
to be a summary, wasn't it? Summary of everything they hadn't done. Quite challenging.
Oh dear.
But I think with all these things, and in general on the sessions, it's always good to have a sense of humour,
Oh,
because
exactly.
you know, we're out in nature with people who've never met each other before very often, and things absolutely never go according to plan. I think we could say that's almost a certainty, and so you need to be very adaptable as a forest bathing
Yes.
guide, just to embrace the fact, embrace adaptability, because there is no way that you can have a complete plan and it follow through, because you can plan your route. We take care to re-scout places if we haven't been for a while, and it's just never the same thing twice.
Yeah.
Different people, even as guides, we're in a different place, different seasons, different weather.
We had a lot of rain in the last one, didn't we? So we had to even on the day of the sessions, we were having to check what was passable and what was too slippery, because most of them didn't have very good gear. So they didn't have the non-slip shoes and stuff. So testing.
That was one of my questions, because any weather.
Almost.
Pretty much any
British weather.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we're in England where we run our sessions, so it would be absolutely ludicrous to not run them in rain.
Yes.
So we would say there are 2 conditions where we wouldn't run them, and that's if there are regular gusts of over 30 miles an hour,
Okay.
early 30s. If it looks as if it's going to continue throughout the session, then we would cancel for that, because
Okay.
we obviously don't want to put anybody at risk of falling branches coming
yes.
off.
Or even whole trees.
Or even trees, yeah. And the other one is if there was lightning. And it depending, if we would, for example, with a charity and there were mobility issues, if there's suddenly forecast that there's a drop to sort of 3 degrees, we may decide that that's not appropriate for that group. However, we don't usually let things like that put us off, but we will repeat and repeat and repeat again about bringing layers and making sure that you're safe, because you do need to be comfortable or you won't be able to switch off.
Yes.
So the emphasis is to be warm and comfortable in whatever way that feels like for you. So if you need to wear 10 layers, wear 10 layers.
And we ran a session, it was one of our most popular this year, funnily enough, in January, and we had 7 people, and it feels like -4, and we kind of thought, should we go ahead? One person postponed, and we didn't stop them, because it is a good reason if you're someone that doesn't really cope with the cold. But we banged on about the need for the right clothing, and everybody turned up pretty much in ski gear, and we had one of the most amazing sessions, actually.
Yeah.
So it is all about being properly dressed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And obviously with the charity sessions, they don't necessarily have the right equipment, and slippery shoes or open shoes isn't ideal, but then we try and pick places in the woods that are a little bit more suitable.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And of course you and I go around with probably at least 2 bags each of spare fleeces and waterproofs and
hats,
what have you.
No shoes, because there's too many sizes required, but we have spares of most, and spare picnic blankets and what have you.
Yeah, so we're prepared.
Yeah, and we did another session for, I don't know whether you want us to talk about the charity one, but obviously we wanted to focus on what what the research is involved.
Yes.
So we did another piece of research for Derby University, the people who did the first research. They did a study of our 6 weeks for Mind, Woking, before they closed. And that was really good because it was 6 weeks, but we definitely had the same people each week. They didn't all come to every week. The majority of them did.
Oh, yeah.
But that was, you know, we were really able to build on the introduction in the
Yes.
first week, going back with more depth
Yeah.
at the other senses, and then summary at the end. So in those 6 weeks, we were doing 2 hours a week for 6 consecutive weeks.
Yes.
And, you know, it's something that we're thinking of developing, you know, as our own course for those who want to
Yes.
have a better understanding of forest bathing for themselves and their family and friends, really.
So what's the format? Because you've touched on that, but what's
Mhm.
the format of a session?
Really good question again.
Yep.
So while we start with an introduction, not as long as this, because otherwise there wouldn't be much left, but just to verify, we generally run sessions that are 3 hours long. We might reduce it to 2.5 hours in the winter, just because, as we've said, if you get cold, you switch off in the wrong way. You know, you stop going into your rest and recuperate, which is not good. So we've got a full 3 hours. So we start with an introduction that could be anything from 20 minutes to half an hour, a bit longer, if we've got a really engaged group who want to know about the theory. Then we talk about a little bit of breathing. We would talk about the autonomic nervous system, the 2 different modes it can be in, and why things like forest bathing have such a miraculous outcome is because we're moving you, hopefully, from one to the other. And that often involves yawning. So we've tried to get over feeling people are bored when they start yawning. We realise it's actually a good sign that they're having the right impact from the session. So we would talk a little bit about breathing, start with some simple breathing exercises. Everything's optional. People can eat or drink during the session if they feel they need to. We would advise against whatever might be a few hazards in that particular location. And we would suggest that they don't use their phones at all. They switch it off or onto airplane mode ideally, and they don't use it to take photographs, because we're really trying to encourage people to be in the moment, viewing things with their eyes, not through the lens of the camera, and switch off from their day-to-day activities. And as I said, everything's optional, but that's our recommendation. And we try and encourage everybody to have a good bit of space around them, maybe a metre or so when we're walking and doing the exercises again, so that they're not interfering with other people's experience. So once we've done that, we then work on the little optional sensory experiences, don't we?
Yeah. So we don't have a specific way that we do this. Very often it will depend on the location and the weather conditions. So for example, if we start off under a tree and there's some wonderful noises and breeze coming through, after we've done a bit of breathing, then we might actually opt to do a little introductory listening. Whereas if we're looking out on a view, then we might do something visual with perspective. And a wonderful thing about perspective is that it helps to widen your peripheral vision. Relating to the autonomic nervous system, when we start off and when people arrive from a session, we're probably very much in our doing, our shopping lists, our what we need to be doing, and so we're very much in that driven state. And with perspective, when we are in that state, our system is geared to work out very much how do we deal with this situation.
Yes.
So our vision narrows.
Yeah.
It's to how, if there was danger, how do we get out of here? Where's the exit point? If you were giving a talk, what do I need to perform this function? So we tend to have quite narrow vision. So what we're aiming to do is to widen that vision, and we can do that through various visual focusing on different focal lengths and through eye movement, for example. Excellent. So that might be something that we would do if the location suggests that. Otherwise, there are, well, as Joe alluded to, many other things to choose from. So yes, and with the charities, we were focusing on a bit on keeping safe, what helps to bring a feeling of safety, and this is also related to the having a widened vision. And it was very heartwarming that many of them did actually comment that they'd noticed that.
sorry, we spoke as well, you mentioned the non-volatile compound, which is something quite interesting for people to know, because there's so many smells which can have a very beneficial effect on the body.
Yes, indeed. We part of the effect is the effect on the nervous system from slowing down. Slowing our breathing and slowing our speed will help to slow down our thoughts and our brain activity. But also what we get with forest bathing is we're spending time out among trees. Obviously we've got the benefit of oxygen, so that's going to really benefit us anyway.
Yes.
But also we've got the compounds which are given off by the trees and other plants in woodland. We're surrounded by them. So we're getting really high quality and a great mixture of these compounds. The name they're given is phytoncides, which means sort of killed by a plant. And the aim of these that are given off by plants is because they can't move, they need to find ways to alter the chemistry of their composition, and this will put off predators, which could be insects, could be browsing animals like sheep or deer. And if they bring tannins, for example, which are very bitter tasting, into the composition, then this will put off those predators. And while these are effectively the plants, the tree's immune system, it actually really benefits our immune system, because we are taking in what are essentially, we call them NVOCs, non-volatile organic compounds, and they are essentially a very mild version of essential oils.
Yes.
So distilled down. It's like the raw state, the mild raw state of what can be distilled down into essential oils, which are very powerful in themselves.
And in my interview with Kim on essential oil, she explained that the olfactory gland is in the limbic system. So it balances the emotional system, which is quite...
It's also the very prehistoric part of the brain, so it's very primal.
Yes.
And so it means that smells can really trigger memories.
Yes.
And we notice, for example, that when we sniff the soil, which, you know, is something that people do a lot as children and not so much as adults, it brings back, you know, a lot of childhood memories for people. And the soil is really good for you too, because it contains a friendly bacteria. And it also releases oxytocin and we think serotonin as well. So a feel-good factor, which is rather a bonus.
Yeah, so no wonder we feel better when we come out.
Yeah, the sense of smell in kids. One of my kids used to smell to find out who a sweatshirt would belong to. You know?
Smell it.
Yes. The kids love, they're very in tune with their sense of smell.
Strong smell of washing powder as well, but even within that, mingled with the individual scent of the pheromone, if you like, of the member of the family. How funny.
I was going to say, Jo, this the other thing with that limbic system is that as well as it being the place where we process memories, it's also where emotions come straight in. So it completely bypasses the brain. So it's not something that we can logically, rationally think of. We can smell something and a memory just comes in, or we can smell something and an emotion comes in.
Instantly.
It's just like an instant thing. And then it's about noticing it and being with it. I mean, we've both done mental health first aid training as well. So that is something that, you know, and also a benefit of being two of us somewhere as well.
And that's where your work comes beautifully into the picture, to allow people to get into these states, which are much more easily done when it's led by somebody else.
Absolutely.
As you said,
They can switch off. I mean, the bizarre thing about phytoncides, Katie said it translates as killed by a plant. So the plants have developed it to protect themselves. And ironically, we're the biggest predators to plants.
But it really
it does us
benefits
good.
our immune system.
Got it a bit wrong there. But we were given some new research yesterday, weren't we, that one of our participants had read that plants that were played bird song, was it plants or trees? I think it was trees actually. But anyway, the ones that were played bird song grew stronger and larger than the ones that weren't.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think he even said twice as fast and twice as
Which
tall.
is incredible. And the thing is, that's a whole nother subject we haven't touched on much, but bird song Birds only sing when they feel safe. And prehistorically, we developed from the same arm, if you like, as birds. So therefore, we do recognise them as kindred spirits, if you like, on a very deep level, cellular level. And we know that when they're singing, it must be safe. So this is another thing that we can utilise. And we went to the WWF building recently. They play birdsong there in the office.
Yes.
Throughout the day.
Yep. So, these are just all fascinating things. With regard to the phytoncides as well, because they come off the trees' bark, off the leaves, off the flowers, off the fruits, and effectively they go into the air, and we take them in through breathing them, but they also land on our skin and go in through our skin. And anything that we don't take in lands in the soil and ends up locked in the soil. So, of course, they come out from the soil on a day when it's been raining and then it's sunny.
Okay.
And hence why the smells are so much stronger when we get that mixture. Another good reason not to cancel a session because it's raining, because it does bring those out more. But effectively, the phytoncides are the tree's Wi-Fi.
Wow.
Because they communicate through that. They're telling the neighbouring trees if there's a danger around so that those trees can make their changes in advance and protect them. Mm-hmm. And then, believe it or not, a recent discovery, well, relatively recent, 10, 15 years
20,
maybe.
Yeah, maybe up to 20 years ago.
Suzanne Simard from British Columbia has discovered that underneath, only a few inches below the surface of the soil, we have their own version of the WWW, which, due to Suzanne Simard's work, is now known as the Wood Wide Web. This is where all of the roots are intercommunicating and connected with mycorrhizae fungus. Mm-hmm. And through that, they can also communicate their messages below as well. So they have the Wi-Fi, they have the WWW. And in every so often, amongst the trees, you have a kind of master tree that's a little bit older, a little bit wiser, a little bit more mature, and therefore able to be sort of king of the area or queen of the area, if you like. Used to be called mother trees, but now, because of the analogy to the Wood Wide Web and the Wi-Fi, they're becoming known as hub trees. But
I
it's
like
a really
to call
fun...
it a router.
Yes, absolutely. It's just so funny.
Oh my God.
And they thought of it 400 million years ago.
Yeah.
And I saw that, I think I told you, Joanna, once I did a 2 weeks juice fast. I went into the park, I looked at the grass, which was so green, and I had a split second of that vision of these roots interconnecting. That was quite a number of years ago, and I had never heard of it before, and it was like the Matrix. Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Yeah. And so obviously, knowing all of that, it's going to protect nature, because you bring people into understanding that there's an invisible world that we need to open to.
Absolutely.
And respect.
And I think the part of having that sort of educational element is key to helping people understand what it is, that there are these amazing things around them and underneath. And when people understand, then they really connect with it. And connecting, you want to protect it.
Yes.
And spread the word. Yeah. So this is, on the bigger picture of what we hope people will get from it, as well as their personal benefits, that it will benefit the woodland and other people that they might talk to about it. So it is fantastic. The Wood Wide Web, as it's known, is it's usually the fungal network it sort of goes around the outside. Usually the outside can go inside the root of the tree, and it can just snake its way round through the soil and connect with trees really a huge distance away. And in Canada, they seem to detect that the same, I think they've used radioactive isotopes, which they put into the root system near one, and they managed to trace it for about 13 miles.
Wow.
Which is astonishing, because obviously it's very clear in those circumstances that there's no way any tree root could be connecting directly with that tree root. So it's all done through the fungal network. It's amazing what they can take. And the trees use this to help each other. There's this amazing community. And you would look, and we used to think, oh, well, it's every tree for itself, surely. but actually it isn't the case. Trees do tend to favour their offspring or of their own species. For example, if they use the broadleaves, for example, they will be photosynthesizing in the sunshine and through the chlorophyll in their leaves and producing carbons and sugars, which obviously they pass through themselves. They benefit from that. They'll also pass it off to any little saplings nearby and to other trees of that species. But they don't stop there. They'll spread it out to other trees in the area. And in the winter months, the evergreens, who can continue to photosynthesize, but to a lesser degree, they will carry on. And if they were to sense that there was a tree in the vicinity which was really struggling, perhaps it was being browsed by deer or very exposed to wind or elements, then it would choose to send extra nutrients through the network to that tree. So they're really looking after each other. It's not living in isolation. And frankly, we feel that, our society could certainly benefit from following that example.
It's an intelligent community, because also if a little sapling comes up and there isn't room for it to grow, they will hold that in that sort of semi-grown state until there's space, and then they'll sort of send it a boost.
Wow.
But I mean, I think we're still in the really early days of the education on here, because it's a new discovery. And, I'm sure we'll learn a lot more. This will seem very, very simplistic in years to come. But, for those people with a spiritual outlook, there's also the possibility to allow yourself to feel part of that community through the Wood Wide Web. And that's not a comfortable feeling for everybody. But if it feels appealing, then, one can ask the Wood Wide Web to bring synchronicities and opportunities to you, which is very, very exciting.
And we saw that with COVID. So many people needed to go in nature, naturally, not even knowing all of this.
Yes, indeed. That's. I think that was certainly a benefit, if we can look for them, which we need to actually people spending more time outside, people who wouldn't normally think to go on walks, discovering what there was around them, footpaths near them. And I've spoken to many people who said that was the case for them, which is wonderful, because it keeps footpaths open, real appreciation. And when you're aware of what there is in your community, again, you'll want to protect it. So a general awareness of what's going on when things are being closed off, we can take some action, investigate, see what's going on there, and ensure that these things are kept open for everybody, because it is really our
resource,
land.
Isn't it?
It is a
resource.
wonderful resource. And of course, for us, we do need to get permission, because most land in certainly in England is owned privately by a very small number of people, in fact. But we always get permission. So it's not that we just tip up with 10 people and run a session. So we get permission, and we pay usually to use the locations as well.
Yes, I mean, it's a full, because obviously it's a commercial venture from the viewpoint of the landowners, and therefore we require permission and to pay a fee. And also we have to have third-party liability, and for some sites we're required to have 10 million in public liability, which is not a cheap option. So, I mean, when people kind of ask us about the fees, not to mention the cost of our training, which was significant, and the number of hours we spend outside doing things for the environment that we're not paid for as well. But one quick thing about, just people often ask what's the difference between that and walking the dog. So we have sort of covered the difference between walking on your own, but just our comment about dogs, and we love dogs individually. They're not a friend to us when they appear in our sessions, just because they become very nosy about what we're doing, and not everybody is comfortable with dogs around them. But the main thing is that if you're out walking your dog is being very mindful. Not so easy for the owner, because a lot of their attention is on what their dog is doing. Is their dog safe? Is it happy? Is it bored? Have they got to get their pooper scooper out, etc. And also the pace of the walk is going to be dictated by the dog as well.
Yes.
So the difference with our sessions is you're led by us, basically. So you can switch off.
Yes.
So I think we've covered a lot of the things. I mean, I suppose regarding a session, just to say that after we've done those sensory experiences, and we have, as we said, a big toolkit of different ones, and different guides will have different ones as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know, we really recommend, obviously you can take some of the skills away and do it yourself, but two of the participants yesterday were saying that even though they've been to 3 sessions, what they find they don't do is discipline themselves to actually go and spend 2.5 to 3 hours in the woods. So coming back with us maybe every 3 months, or you know, monthly would be wonderful, fortnightly would be even better, because it would really benefit your health. But you know, the idea of coming on one of our sessions is it does discipline you to spend the full 3 hours out there, rather than cutting corners.
Yeah.
How do people find you?
Well, good question again. Well, our website is harmonyhealing.uk. Sorry, that's my website. It's under that. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to slip in that little promotion.
That's fine.
Harmonyinnature.uk is our forest bathing website.
Okay.
And actually, my own website is harmonyhealing.co.uk anyway, so I muddled the two up there. And that's much wider summary of what else we do, or I do. But we do have some theory about forest bathing on there as well, and we have a list of where we're going and what we're doing, so a list of our events on there. Yeah, so that's where they find out what we're up to, and anybody who's on our mailing list, we don't really like to call it that because it sounds like we're going to be writing to them all the time, but we just send a monthly update of something seasonal and what we're up to in the next month or two.
And Katie, do you want to give your personal website as well?
Yeah, well, I don't actually have a website, but I tend to, you can find me on Facebook, Katie J. Robinson, and that's health and wellbeing tips there. And Katie Robinson with actually I'm wearing this, stand next to a beech tree, if you're looking for me. What I really love to do is to combine a lot of the modalities that I've trained in, like nutrition. Sometimes people find it very difficult to sort of adapt to change. They know they want to make changes, but they're not sure. So I like to try and make it easier for people to make tweaks to what they're doing, and gradually it causes big changes to happen. So nutrition, I do some Reiki and other things. I've got a bit more into sort of shamanic stuff recently. So we might do on my personal ones, we might do stuff that's not strictly just the forest
fire
bathing.
walking and things you do.
Yes, what I have done. I do love fire walking. It's a great thing for.
I've done it.
I do actually have a glass walk. Nobody's requested
Yes.
that one yet, but I do love that because it's.
I'm interested.
It's a challenge. People think, oh my goodness, I'd rather walk through fire than over broken glass. But actually, it's on you. Whereas a fire walk, it's on the fire, but being in the right mental state. Whereas with a glass walk, it's about your focus and trusting where you put your feet. So it's an incredible experience. Sort of a mix of empowerment and health, natural health.
I mean, we do have
sort of
Harmony in Nature on LinkedIn, don't we, as well?
Yes, we do.
And a Harmony in Nature page on Facebook as well.
And what else do you do, Joanna?
Well, you'll be sorry you asked that.
In a
as
short,
succinctly as possible.
Yes.
So I'm a specialist in energy healing. So I'm knowledgeable about ancient Egyptian philosophies. So my strapline, if you like, is
very knowledgeable,
bringing ancient wisdom into the modern world. And so Egyptian alchemy, healing. I specialise in my own system of that called Riyad Sikhem. And I'm knowledgeable about angels because my sister has 10 books published, sold nearly 1 million copies.
Ooh.
And that's Essene angelology. So I'm knowledgeable about them as well. So predominantly those, but I do full moon meditations most months online as well. And I offer online training for my healing system. You can just do individual modules of it. You don't have to study the whole thing. Violet Flame and Avamenti and
amazing
about angels and chakra cleansing and healing with colours and crystals and so on. So, and sort of soul readings as well, past life reading. So yeah, in a nutshell.
Fabulous. Anything you think we've missed about the forest bathing?
Well, we do know that there's so much. As I say,
Yes.
we could stand up and give a
Yes.
lecture for an hour and a half. So we've certainly missed out some things, but we hope it will really encourage people to go
understand,
out
yeah.
and to find, if you're further from us, then to see whether there's any nature connection sessions, forest bathing sessions near you. But we're always open to hearing from people, even if you're just curious or you want to know what our updates are.
Corporate sessions as
yeah,
well.
we do corporate sessions. We have run a couple. We had a lovely one recently with some staff from WWF, and that was really one of their teams. And that went down really well, because after all, they were saying this is why we do what we do, working for nature. But of course, we're spending almost all our time behind a computer and at a desk. And so for them, it was a real realization that, you know, they also need to bring more nature into their lives. And we do at the end, we talk about different ways that we can do things on a daily and weekly basis. So, yeah, we hope people go away with a lot behind them.
Well, and with a sort of eye to the move towards sustainability and eco-friendly activities within companies as well, then a regular forest bathing session quarterly, say for a large corporate, could be brilliant for just maintaining well-being within their staff in a very, you know, carbon friendly way.
Yes.
So there's that. We also offer obviously private sessions for individuals, families, friends. Ideally at one of the sites that we're already familiar with, because new sites obviously have to be staked out and risk assessed by us, so that impacts on the cost, but it's all possible.
Yep.
And we're both public speakers as well,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
can put together, you know, talks for conferences if you haven't got the outdoor space to do the practical side. But obviously the practical side is like, you know, what we really want, but we can make the most of it. And actually there's significant benefits just from looking at pictures of nature, because it still speaks to us on another level. And we haven't talked about the key word that we talked about at the beginning before we were on camera, neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Which is just about how, by experiencing these pleasant sessions, we can be a party to restructuring, rewiring your brain away from traumas, etc. So you start to rethink experiences of the past in a more positive and constructive way.
Yeah.
And specifically because obviously in the light of cancer and somebody having been diagnosed and the brutality, the violence of such a diagnosis, bringing all of this, especially at the beginning when you're completely in the fight or flight survival mode, bringing it here and learning to let it go, to relax and find some sense of inner balance, priceless.
Absolutely. And I was at a session recently where the couple of people who were surviving, you know, they'd survived cancer and they were doing pretty well. And one of them just said, I just want to bring this to everybody who's been going what I've been going through.
Amazing
because
tool.
it's you know, it's helping to reset your nervous system. And obviously the more frequently you do it, the easier it becomes. It would be wonderful if this came to be a habit with people.
Yes.
We just automatically think, I'm just going to go outside. You know, you might think, oh, it's the hearing that's really strong for me today, and just spend a few minutes doing something that will reset you. So it's there, it's available for all of us, and we have a lot of tools, and it's, for us, it's the aim is passing on those tools so that other people can then take them out into their lives. You know, we're not expecting people to be coming to us every month for 20 years. That's not the aim of it. It's that you learn your tools. We certainly encourage people to come a few times, and
we
by then,
turn them away if they wanted to.
if they wanted to, that would be fine. But it's not something we want people to be dependent on. It's on then exploring ways in which it speaks to you in the areas you have available. So yeah, it is. It is about empowering you to find what works for you, and really appreciating, being in the moment, and appreciating the small things, and not panicking so much about the bigger stuff.
I'd just like to say something very quickly, if that's okay, about the ANS, just because we've
Yes.
mentioned it several times. So the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, is the part of us that runs all the functions for us. So like we don't think about eating a meal and then digesting it, we just do it. You know, we don't think about much about what goes on in our body, fighting infection and so on. But the one thing that we don't think about but we can think about and override is breathing. So we breathe with most of us, unless we've got an issue, most of us breathe without having to think about it. But if we want to hold our breath for a bit longer and interfere with the breathing in a way that's constructive, we can. And so we talked about the two different modes of the autonomic nervous system. One is called fight or flight. It has a new name now, fight, flight, flop, friend or freeze. But anyway, it was fight or flight when I was doing biology. And that's also known as the sympathetic nervous system. And then we have the parasympathetic, which is also known as rest and recuperate. So very quickly, in a nutshell, it's developed from thousands of years ago, from prehistoric man, if you like, or certainly very early man, to help us survive a short-term danger. So if we were to come across, say, in this woods a few hundred years ago, wild boar, our body would be thinking, right, now you might need to survive a few hours, a day or so if you're lucky. So we need to put all that effort into that immediate survival. And that means pumping blood to the muscles so you could run faster, helping the vision to see in an almost tunnel visioned way. We've talked about that. So that you're more focused on a method of escape, whether you're going to fight whatever it is or pretend to be dead or whatever. So everything focuses on that, and the body decides that in that moment, because your survival in the short term is imminent and important, it doesn't matter if you're digesting your food, if you're fertile anymore, you know, your reproductive system is irrelevant, if you're fighting that cold germ that's just moved in, and certainly wouldn't be a good time to be having a quick nap.
Yeah,
So
or digest.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the side effect is possibly insomnia, IBS, you know, a compromised immune system, fertility problems, etc. And that's because we should be 20% in the fight or flight and 80% in the rest and recuperate.
Yeah.
But our body interprets our modern lifestyle as stress.
Yeah.
And instead of it being a short-term mode, it's become a long-term mode. And clearly when we're a long time in, you know, more like 80% in the fight or flight and 20% in the rest and recuperate, that's when a lot of these conditions become a long-term problem, like IBS, etc. And hence, that's why it seems to be such a miraculous intervention for health issues, because that's what it's really doing, is helping to move you from one to the other. Yeah. And the way of seeing people are moving from one to the other is often yawning, funnily enough.
Yeah. Oh, that's my favourite reaction, isn't it, Jo?
Yes.
If Jo's leading an activity, often I can be found just going. I just can't stop.
Excellent.
It's fabulous. So
I try not to be offended.
Yawning, falling asleep during the relaxation.
Yes.
People are sometimes very apologetic, but we go, no, that's fantastic, because that's what you need. I mean, I had a couple come to a session a good while back, and she said afterwards, she said, I can't believe it. She said, I had so much energy. I was whizzing around doing things. And she said, normally I'm just really lacking in energy with my health conditions. And she said, yeah, my husband, he was like spark out on the sofa for the entire afternoon. I said, well, does he actually, is he always very busy normally? And she said, yes, he never stops.
Well,
so there is a fantastic example of how nature will give you, and the forest bathing in particular will give you what you need to do. Yeah. So,
well, we end with the tree relaxation, don't we? Sometimes if, weather condition, weather, what would I say, supporting us, so if it's pouring rain, we don't lie down under the canopy of trees, but assuming that it's suitable weather, we will more or less end with that, and we try and have a little tea ceremony if there's time as well, with a herbal tea. So we try and cover all the senses if we can, and we just end up by saying that the effects of forest bathing are cumulative, and certain aspects of it, if you've had enough hours in the woods, will carry on. Well, certainly the natural killer cells we mentioned, they actually carry on increasing after the session. They reach their height a few hours later. Yeah. They then plateau after about 2 weeks, don't they, and start to drop off. So if you can get yourself out into the woods every 2 weeks, that's the idea. It doesn't have to be a formal session, but if you can get yourself out for an hour to 3 hours, it's ideal. But even 10 minutes is better than nothing.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
And
Yeah.
we do also sometimes mention the idea of earthing. We tend to call it earthing rather than
Yes.
grounding, because grounding can be more a sense of something, of feeling connected and in your body. So sometimes during the tree relaxation we might invite people, if they feel like that, and obviously the warmer weather's more suitable, to take shoes and socks off. And and then they can have both feet on the
Yes.
earth, or both hands works also, to be in contact. So our skin to the skin of the earth
In two places.
In two places. So it's a bit like a battery. You need two parts of you.
Yes.
You could have an arm and a leg
Yes.
if that suits you. But it is absolutely amazing, the results of this. There is a great YouTube movie, the Earthing movie, which we really enjoy, which goes into a lot more depth. But basically what happens is a long time ago, well, actually not that long really, I suppose the 60s, when rubber-soled shoes came to be the norm, it basically isolates us, whereas when we were using leather-soled shoes and more natural products,
Right.
there was a connection, and the electrical charge could
Yes.
pass between us and the earth without any impediment. But now it cuts off. So if we have a build-up of a lot of positive ions, not enough electrons in our bodies, they're circulating around without any way to release. And certainly from my research, I understand that pretty much every chronic health condition, there's a surplus of positive ions in the body. And although we say positive, it isn't positive in terms of effect.
It's the
It's
charge,
actually,
isn't
it's
it?
the charge.
Yeah. Yes.
Whereas the negative ions are the ones that have the positive effect, if you like. And even, I mean, it's a really great thing to do if you experimented for a week. But even if you are there for a moment, there are some benefits that happen instantaneously. So I can see you're sitting there with your hands
Yes,
on the
I've
ground.
put my hands.
So already,
Negative ions.
yeah, already,
Yes.
for example, your the skin conductivity will have changed.
Yeah.
It may even be that the blood viscosity is starting to change as well, or that might take a few minutes. So there are all sorts of things. Your stress, your cortisol and levels will be changing already. So there's a mass of stuff that can happen in just a few seconds, in a minute, and then perhaps about 15 minutes down the line there will be other things that will kick in, and for hours, you know, if you're out gardening or doing something safely in nature with your feet on the bare earth, there would be further benefits to that. So we really encourage that can be a nice self-practice to experiment with beyond the session, isn't it? But we'll often encourage people in the session to have about 20 minutes in contact with the earth.
Weather permitting.
And weather permitting, yes.
But also
That's
those negative
good.
ions are in water, so if you're by a waterfall or if you're by the sea, that's one of the feel-good factors we get from the sea. And running, obviously, with bare feet on sand can be a bit burning if it's a hot day, but it does do the same balance.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because as a kinesiologist, it's one of my first correction. We call it ionization. And we use a homeopathic remedy from the north and south pole because again we say that on the cellular level, inside the cells is either positive or negative, and outside is the opposite. And it's completely amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's wonderful, and we feel very lucky and privileged to be able to do this stuff, because you know, it's all very well being theoretical, but when you see the difference it makes for people who are in a terrible state of stress, and you know, sometimes people that the lines and their face, you just notice a really big difference. So it's wonderful to be able to do it.
Some stressed
So,
executives even said that they, you know, it was the first time they hadn't thought about their problems, didn't they, for a while? Anyway, that was longer than we meant to speak, but as you can tell, we'd have to have our batteries taken out sometime.
So we've covered everything now.
I think so.
Did
Thank
you
so
realise that
much.
some of the sun came out?
Did.
We asked and prayed for the sun to come out because there was a little bit of rain when we started. And I think I would like to thank the trees because it's been absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
And we feel actually that nature really supports us. It's a very very rare. I can only think of a couple of occasions over years that we've had difficult, trickier conditions. Normally, even if it's raining, the sun will come out. We get a rainbow by the end of the session.
Oh, God, I love rainbows. Fabulous. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadej.
Thank you.
Been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you for the Harry Edwards to give us the permission to film here. And hopefully this will be of incredible interest to a lot of people. And it will actually clarify what forest bathing, I've actually learned stuff that I didn't know. I mean, the science is incredible. Wow. So thank you so much for spending all this time with us. And hopefully at some point we'll do more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nadej.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
Bye.